Have you ever lost an opportunity, damaged a relationship, or been completely misunderstood because of a single conversation? What if I told you that most people spend years learning how to read, write, and work, but almost no time learning how to communicate? Every day, people lose promotions, friendships, clients, and even life-changing opportunities. Not because they aren't smart, not because they aren't talented, but because they say the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong way. The shocking part. Many of them never realized communication was the real problem. Imagine being able to walk into any conversation with confidence, to express your thoughts clearly, to persuade without manipulating, to listen so effectively that people feel understood, and to build stronger relationships simply through the power of your words. Over the next 21 days, you'll discover practical techniques that can transform the way you speak, listen, connect, and influence. This isn't just about talking better, it's about changing the quality of every relationship, every opportunity, and every interaction in your life. Welcome to 21 Days of Effective Communication. Let's begin day one. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Book Podcast Zone. I am your host, Emma.
And I am John. It is a genuine privilege to be here with you today to unpack what is arguably, the most critical skill set a human being can possibly develop.
I completely agree. And we are looking at a massive roadmap today. A truly transformative framework designed to take the absolute messiness of human interaction and turn it into something you can navigate with total intention.
Right, because it usually is a mess, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely a mess. But our goal over this journey is to look at 12 distinct shifts in how we connect. We're going to strip away the assumptions, look under the hood at the biology and the psychology of our interactions, and figure out how to rebuild our communication from the ground up.
I love that phrase, from the ground up, because that's what it takes.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize to you listening, this is a completely judgment-free space. We've all said the wrong thing. We've all frozen up in an important meeting. But today, we are figuring out exactly why that happens.
And the why is really where all the power lies. Because we so often treat bad communication as this, like a personality flaw. We tell ourselves, I'm just not a people person, or I'm just awkward under pressure.
Right, like it's just baked into who you are.
Exactly. But what the research actually shows is that communication isn't a fixed trait at all. It is a highly mechanical process driven by our neurobiology.
Wow, so it's biological.
Yeah, completely. When you experience what I call communication paralysis,
Yeah.
it is not because you suddenly lost your intelligence. It's an actual physiological override.
Okay, let's actually dig into that physiological override right now because that is so relatable. I think we all have a version of that nightmare where you're supposed to speak and your brain just packs its bags and leaves the building.
Right, the classic brain freeze.
Totally. Let's ground this with the scenario we see all the time, especially in highly competitive environments here in the States. So picture a brilliant software engineer in Silicon Valley.
Okay, high pressure, high stakes.
Exactly. And this person is coding complex algorithms that essentially run the company. They understand the product architecture way better than the CEO does.
They are the absolute expert.
Right. But every single quarter, they get passed over for a management promotion. They watch people with half their technical knowledge just leapfrog them into director roles.
Ouch, that happens so often.
It really does. And it all comes down to the boardroom. When our brilliant engineer is asked to present their vision to the executive team, they just freeze.
Yeah.
They look at their shoes, they ramble about highly technical minutia that the board doesn't understand at all. Their voice gets incredibly quiet, and they just rush to sit back down. So why is their brain doing that to them?
Well, it's a tragedy of evolutionary biology, honestly. When that engineer walks into the boardroom, they consciously know they're just giving a PowerPoint presentation.
Right, it's just slides.
Exactly, just slides. But their subconscious, specifically the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, is actively scanning the room. And it sees a group of high-status individuals staring intently, waiting for a performance.
Oh, wow. So the brain misinterprets the room.
Completely. The amygdala interprets this social pressure as a literal physical threat to survival. It doesn't know the difference between a judgmental CEO and a hungry predator.
Wait, really? A saber-toothed tiger and a CEO are the same thing to the amygdala?
To that part of the brain, yes. So it instantly triggers the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and instantly cortisol and adrenaline just flood the engineer's system.
So they are literally in a fight-or-flight response over a quarterly update.
Exactly. And here is the mechanical problem with fight or flight. When the amygdala takes over, It actively suppresses the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex does what exactly?
That's the part of the brain responsible for logical reasoning, emotional regulation, and, crucially, for our engineer complex language formulation.
Oh no, so the language center is shut down.
Yes. The brain is diverting resources away from your vocabulary and pushing them toward the muscles in your legs so you can physically run away.
That is wild.
Right. That is exactly why the engineer's throat gets tight, their mouth gets dry, and they literally cannot find the words to explain their brilliant algorithm. The words are locked in a part of the brain that has basically been powered down.
That completely reframes the entire problem. I mean, they aren't failing because they lack leadership potential. Their delivery mechanism is literally being hijacked by their own nervous system.
Precisely.
But if it's a biological response, how do we actually fix it? Because the source material talks about this 21-day period to rewire our approach. And honestly, I have to push back a little here.
Go for it.
It sounds a bit like self-help jargon. Like, if my amygdala evolved over millions of years to freak out in front of the board, am I really going to rewire my brain by reading a few chapters? Or are we just talking about learning a script, like forcing myself to smile and make fake eye contact?
No, that is a totally valid skepticism. But we are absolutely not talking about scripts or parlor tricks.
Okay, good.
Because memorizing a script while your nervous system is in full panic mode is like trying to put a fresh coat of paint on a house while the kitchen is literally on fire.
That is a great analogy. People will still smell the smoke.
Exactly. They always smell the smoke. The 21-day timeline is actually rooted in the science of neuroplasticity, specifically a concept called Hebbian learning.
Hebbian learning. What's the core idea there?
The foundational rule is neurons that fire together wire together.
Fire together, wire together. Okay.
Right. So right now, our engineer's brain has this highly efficient, heavily insulated neural pathway that connects the idea of speaking to authority directly with panic and shutdown.
So it's an automatic loop.
Exactly. And every time they panic in a meeting, that specific pathway gets stronger. So rewiring means we use specific deliberate practices to start building a brand new pathway.
How do we do that?
We practice regulating the nervous system before we speak. We practice reframing the event from a threat to an opportunity. And over a sustained period of focused repetition, which is often cited as a minimum of 21 days for simple behavioral shifts to begin taking hold, the brain actually builds new synaptic connections.
Wow. So it physicalizes the new habit?
Yes. The new pathway becomes the default, and the old panic pathway weakens just from disuse. You are fundamentally upgrading the operating system.
That makes a lot of sense. You aren't just learning what to say, you are training your body to feel safe enough to actually say it. Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
Perfectly said.
Now, if we are talking about what triggers that nervous system response in the first place, we really have to look at what's happening before we even walk into the room.
Right, the setup.
Exactly. The framework points us toward the hidden language inside our heads, these invisible conversations that basically dictate everything we do. And I find this fascinating because we tend to think of communication strictly as the words leaving our mouths.
Which is such a massive misconception.
It really is. The data suggests the most important conversation is actually the one we are having with ourselves.
It is the absolute foundation of everything. We have this internal monologue running almost constantly, and it's governed largely by what neuroscientists call the default mode network.
The default mode network.
And this internal narrator is constantly predicting the future based on your past experiences. The critical insight here is that your brain is a predictive machine.
It's trying to guess what happens next.
Exactly. It doesn't just react to reality, it anticipates reality and prepares your body for it. So if your internal monologue is telling a story of failure or conflict or rejection, your brain sends signals to your body to prepare for a literal fight or an injury.
Which means your heart rate changes, your breathing gets shallow, your muscles tense up.
All of it, yes.
So we're essentially preloading our physical state based on a conversation that no one else can even hear. Let's ground this in something visceral for you listening. Let's transport ourselves to New York City.
Okay, great setting for stress.
Oh, the ultimate setting. So you are an employee prepping for your annual salary negotiation. You are riding the subway from Brooklyn into Manhattan.
The train is loud, you're gripping the pole.
Exactly. And your internal narrator is just spiraling out of control. Yeah. You're telling yourself, they're going to lowball me. My boss didn't even look at me in the hallway yesterday. They are definitely going to bring up that one client account I messed up in October.
I'm going to have to fight for every single dollar.
Right. So by the time you get off at your stop, walk into the corporate building, and sit down in your boss's glass-walled office, what has that internal monologue actually done to you?
Well, it has essentially turned you into a hostile entity.
A hostile entity, just from thinking.
Absolutely. I mean, you haven't even said hello yet, but your physiological state is screaming defensiveness. Because you spent the last 45 minutes on the train preparing for an attack, your body language reflects that exact preparation.
So my shoulders are probably hunched, right?
Yes, hunched slightly, protecting your vital organs. Your jaw is set. And when your boss looks at you, they don't consciously know why, but their own nervous system detects a subtle threat.
Wow.
It's a phenomenon related to neuroception, which is our subconscious ability to detect safety or danger in another person's subtle cues. Human beings are incredibly adept at reading micro-expressions.
Micro-expressions, those are the tiny facial twitches, right?
Exactly. They're involuntary facial movements that flash for a fraction of a second. The
Yeah.
tension in your cheeks, the narrowing of your eyes. You might think you have a perfect poker face, but your face is broadcasting the exact script of your anxious subway ride.
And that completely poisons the well, doesn't it? I mean, if my boss was actually planning to offer me a really generous raise, but I walk in radiating this defensive, hostile energy, they're going to subconsciously pull back.
They absolutely will. Their own amygdala might flare up in response to your micro-expressions.
Suddenly, the negotiation does become adversarial, not because they wanted to lowball me, but because my internal hidden language manufactured a conflict. It's like a terrifying self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. You literally created the reality you are most afraid of. And this is why mastering communication has to begin in the mind. If you don't rewrite the script of that internal narrator, all the external techniques like your vocabulary, your active listening, your posture, it will all feel completely incongruent to the person you were speaking with.
They can sense the mismatch.
Yes, they will hear your polite words, but they will feel the hostility or the terror underneath them. And humans will always trust the feeling over the words.
It's like having a radio transmitting a beautiful symphony on the main channel, but blasting static and sirens on the underlying frequency.
That is a perfect way to put it.
The listener is going to be incredibly uncomfortable, even if they can't articulate why. Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
So true.
That brings us perfectly into the transition from those internal thoughts to our external, deeply ingrained habits. The outline talks about breaking old communication patterns. And it really makes me realize that we don't just invent our communication styles out of thin air, do we?
Not at all. We absorb them.
We are basically walking tape recorders playing back the greatest hits of our childhood homes and our hometowns.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. From a very early age, we are utilizing mirror neurons to observe and mimic the survival strategies of the adults around us.
Right, because kids are just sponges for that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you grew up in a household where love and attention were only given when you were quiet and compliant, your brain wired a pattern. It said, to be safe and loved, I must withhold my opinions.
Oh, wow.
But if you grew up in a volatile home where the only way to be heard was to shout over everyone else, your brain wired a completely different pattern. Volume equals existence.
And these aren't conscious choices we are making, right?
No, they are adapted survival mechanisms. And the crazy part is, we carry these exact mechanisms straight into our adult lives, into our marriages, and into our workplaces.
The regional and cultural patterns in the United States illustrate this so perfectly. Think about a professional who grew up in the Midwest, maybe a small town in Minnesota.
Okay, classic Midwest.
The overarching cultural pattern there is often what people call Midwest nice. The primary values are politeness, keeping the peace, and never, ever making anyone else feel uncomfortable.
Right. Direct confrontation is seen as deeply rude.
Exactly. So if this person is upset, they don't say, I'm upset about this. They might use heavy sighs, vague suggestions, or say something like, well, that's certainly an interesting way to do it.
Which is a pattern of passive aggressiveness.
Yes, born entirely out of a desire to be polite.
And to them, it doesn't feel like a manipulative pattern. It feels like basic human decency.
Exactly. But then imagine the same professional gets transferred to a fast-paced corporate office in Boston or New York.
Oh, that's a culture shock.
Huge culture shock. Because the East Coast cultural pattern is often the exact opposite. It values speed, extreme directness, and efficiency. Politeness there is defined by not wasting someone's time.
Right. Get to the point.
So when the Midwesterner uses their passive-aggressive, indirect pattern, their East Coast colleagues are incredibly frustrated. They perceive the Midwesterner as evasive, lacking confidence, or even manipulative because they won't just say what they want.
Well, the Midwesterner views the Boston colleagues as shockingly hostile, rude, and aggressive.
Yes. The tragedy is that everyone is just running their inherited default software.
It is a profound clash of operating systems.
Yeah.
And the challenge of breaking these patterns is that they are deeply embedded in the basal ganglia.
The basal ganglia, what does that part do?
That's the part of the brain responsible for habit formation and automatic behaviors. When a behavior moves into the basal ganglia, it requires almost zero conscious thought to execute.
So it's pure reflex.
Yes. By the time the Midwesterner realizes they are being passive-aggressive, the words have already left their mouth.
That is exactly where I get stuck on this concept, to be honest. If it's literally automatic, happening in a part of the brain that completely bypasses conscious thought, how do we stop it?
It's tough.
I mean, is the goal to become hypervigilant and try to catch the bad habit in the millisecond before we speak? Because that sounds exhausting. Or is there a more mechanical way to override it?
Trying to stop a basal ganglia habit with pure prefrontal cortex willpower is a losing battle. It is like trying to stop a freight train by standing on the tracks and holding up your hand.
You're just going to get crushed.
Exactly. The fatigue of hypervigilance will eventually wear you down. And when you are tired or stressed, the train will just run you over, meaning you will default right back to the old pattern.
So what's the alternative?
The most effective mechanism in behavioral psychology is not eradication. It is substitution.
Substitution. Okay, explain that.
You don't focus all your energy on not being passive-aggressive. Instead, you build a completely new habit loop. You identify the cues, say, a colleague making a mistake.
Right.
Instead of the old routine, which might be a heavy sigh and a sarcastic comment, you practice a new routine. You practice stating clearly, I noticed an error here, let's fix it.
So you give your brain a new track to run on.
Exactly. You practice this new, direct path so consistently over the 21 days that it begins to form its own neural highway. Eventually, the new highway becomes faster and more efficient than the old dirt road of passive aggressiveness.
And the brain likes efficiency.
It loves efficiency. It will naturally start taking the new highway. The old pattern isn't necessarily destroyed, it just gets overgrown from lack of use.
I love that. You aren't fighting your past, you are just building better infrastructure for your future. Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
Well said.
So, if we successfully override our defensive habits and we step into an interaction ready to connect, what is the very first thing we should actually do?
The answer usually surprises people.
Right, because the surprising answer from the research is absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
The next core concept is about listening like you actually care. And the distinction here between true listening and what most of us do every day is staggering. We spend so much energy worrying about the perfect words to say, but the true power dynamic shifts when we shut our mouths.
It is the great paradox of influence. The most charismatic people in any room are rarely the ones doing the most talking.
They're the ones listening.
Yes, doing the deepest listening. We have to separate true active listening from the default human behavior, which is simply waiting for your turn to speak.
Waiting for your turn. We are all so guilty of that.
We all are. When you are waiting for your turn, your brain is highly active, but it is entirely self-focused. You are listening to the first half of their sentence, immediately formulating your counter-argument, waiting for a micro-pause, and then launching your own rehearsed thought.
You are physically present, but cognitively, you have completely left the building. I think we all do that because it feels efficient. But it creates this exhausting dual monologue where no one is actually connecting. To illustrate the difference true listening makes, let's look at the absolute extremes of social status and attention.
Okay, let's hear it.
Picture a local, independent coffee shop in Seattle. You walk in, and the barista doesn't just mechanically ask for your order. They stop wiping the counter. They look you directly in the eye. They remember that last week you had a stressful meeting.
That's rare, but amazing when it happens.
Right. They ask about it, and for the 45 seconds it takes to pull the espresso shot, you are the absolute center of their universe. They nod, their facial expressions match the tone of your story. When you leave, you feel this strange, lingering sense of validation and warmth.
You feel seen.
Exactly. Now, contrast that with a visit to a highly prestigious, incredibly expensive specialist doctor in a busy urban clinic.
Oh, this is a great contrast.
You finally get into the exam room after an hour. The doctor walks in, stares at an iPad, fires off 3 rapid questions, interrupts your answers to type notes, and hands you a prescription without ever truly making eye contact.
It's a brilliant juxtaposition because the doctor has immense structural authority, credentials, and social status. The barista is making minimum wage.
Right.
But in that moment, who do you genuinely trust more?
The barista, 100%.
Right. Who has more actual influence over your emotional state?
Exactly. I would trust the barista with my life secrets, and I leave the doctor's office feeling like a piece of meat on an assembly line. It proves that trust has almost nothing to do with authority and everything to do with the quality of attention being paid.
And here's the underlying mechanics of why that barista interaction feels so powerful. True active listening requires a massive suspension of the ego.
Suspension of the ego, that sounds difficult.
It is incredibly difficult. It is an energetic, highly demanding cognitive process. You have to actively suppress your own default mode network from wandering. You have to monitor the speaker's tone, their microexpressions, the pacing of their breath.
You have to really work at it.
Yes, and when you do this, you are signaling profound safety to their nervous system. The speaker's brain recognizes that it is not under attack and that it does not have to fight for resources or attention.
So they relax.
More than relax. In response, their brain begins to release oxytocin, the neurochemical associated with bonding and trust. The barista literally altered your brain chemistry for the better by expending the cognitive calories required to truly pay attention.
Cognitive calories. I love that term.
It's accurate. The doctor, despite their brilliance, relied on status and conserved their cognitive calories, leaving your nervous system entirely unsoothed.
That phrasing, cognitive calories, is just so helpful. We don't listen well because it is literally exhausting to do so. We default to waiting for a turn because it's biologically cheaper.
It's the path of least resistance.
But the return on investment for spending those calories is just off the charts. You buy loyalty and trust in seconds. Like, subscribe, and share for more update and continue to next.
Absolutely.
Of course, we can't just listen forever. Eventually, we have to actually speak. And this brings us to one of the most volatile areas of human interaction, which is speaking with emotional intelligence.
This is where the real work happens.
It is. The framework defines this as the ability to express difficult feelings without destroying the relationship or sounding weak. We are moving from the receptive state back into the active state, but doing so when the stakes are sky high.
This is where so many professionals and partners stumble. We've inherited this deeply flawed cultural myth that logic and emotion are mutually exclusive.
Right, like you can only be one or the other.
Exactly. We are taught that displaying emotion, especially in a professional setting, is a sign of instability or a loss of control. So people attempt to suppress their emotions, aiming for this cold, detached professionalism.
Just burying it down.
But as neuroscientist Lisa Feldman-Barrett's work on constructed emotion suggests, you cannot separate the emotion from the cognition. Humans are emotional creatures first.
The emotion is always there.
Yes. And suppressing the emotion doesn't make it disappear, it just makes it leak out in toxic, uncontrolled ways.
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence is not about suppressing feelings. It is about developing emotional granularity.
Emotional granularity. That means being able to pinpoint exactly what you are feeling rather than just a broad sense of like, I'm mad, right?
Precisely. It's having a vast vocabulary for your internal state.
Let's apply that to a highly stressful real-world conflict. Let's imagine an expensive real estate market like Los Angeles.
Well, the tension is already high.
Very high.
Yeah.
You have two roommates sharing a tiny, vastly overpriced apartment. The baseline stress of rent and cramped space is already huge. One roommate consistently leaves a massive, crusty mess of pots and pans in the sink for days.
A classic comp.
The emotionally unintelligent, low granularity response is an explosion. The frustrated roommate finally snaps, screams about the dishes, attacks the other person's character. You are a selfish slob. And maybe brings up a flaw from 6 months ago.
Right. Everything gets thrown into the fight.
Exactly. The amygdala has fully taken over. The relationship is instantly fractured, and the other roommate immediately goes on the defensive.
Right, because an attack on character guarantees a defensive counterattack. The actual problem, which is just the dishes, is completely lost in the emotional shrapnel.
Now, let's look at the exact same emotional intensity, but in a high-stakes business environment.
Yeah.
You have two co-founders at a tech startup who are rapidly burning through their venture capital runway.
Extremely high stress.
If one founder feels the other is making reckless financial decisions without consulting them, that same kind of explosive, attacking argument could literally destroy the company overnight. In both the LA apartment and the startup boardroom, the core need is identical.
Yes, they both need to set a boundary.
How do you state a boundary with absolute firmness? honoring your own intense frustration, but without the vitriol that burns the bridge.
The emotionally intelligent approach requires a very specific mechanical formula that bypasses the other person's amygdala while fully honoring your own emotional reality.
Okay, what is the formula?
The formula is state the observable fact, state the granular emotion it causes in you, and state the required boundary or solution.
Fact, emotion, boundary.
Exactly. No character attacks, no assumptions of intent.
So how does that actually sound for the LA roommates?
It sounds like this. When the dishes are left in the sink for 3 days, I feel incredibly anxious and overwhelmed in my own home. I need us to agree to a 24-hour rule moving forward.
Wow, that is clean.
Notice the mechanics. You aren't calling them a slob. You're owning your own feeling of anxiety. And it's
Yeah.
incredibly difficult to argue with someone else's stated internal reality.
And for the startup co-founders, it would be, when we authorize major expenses without prior alignment, I feel terrified about our financial runway. I need us to implement a dual approval process.
Exactly. And I want to highlight something crucial here. Many people fear that saying, I feel terrified or I feel anxious makes them sound weak.
Right, especially in business.
But it is the exact opposite. Owning your emotions with that level of precision requires immense psychological strength and self-awareness. It disarms the other person. You aren't attacking them, you are placing a shared problem on the table for both of you to solve.
I think of it like a pressure valve on an industrial water heater.
That's a good visual.
Right. The water heater is generating all this intense steam and pressure, which represents your anger, frustration, or fear. If you just weld the valve shut and pretend the steam doesn't exist, which is what we do when we suppress our emotions to appear professional, the pressure builds until the tank violently explodes.
It takes the whole house down.
Exactly. That is the screaming match over the dishes. But if you learn how to use the valve to release the steam intentionally in controlled, structured bursts, using that formula you just described, you keep the system functioning safely.
That is a flawless analogy.
Emotional intelligence is learning how to operate the valve so you don't blow up the house.
And the master communicator not only knows how to operate their own pressure valve, but they can sense when the pressure in the room is rising and help others safely release theirs too. Like, subscribe, and share for more update and continue to next.
Transitioning from managing our own emotions, we arrive at the art of directing the conversation entirely. The next focus is on the power of questions.
This is a game changer.
It really is. The framework highlights how mastering the art of asking the right questions creates instant connection and deeper understanding. We touched on the dual monologue earlier, where two people are just talking at each other. Questions seem to be the tool that shatters that dynamic.
Questions are the steering wheel of human interaction. Whoever is asking the questions is actually directing the flow, the depth, and the emotional tone of the exchange.
They hold the reins.
Yes. But more profoundly, a masterfully crafted question completely flips the power dynamic and the neurochemistry of the moment. It forces the brain out of its rehearsed basal ganglia scripts and into a state of active present moment processing in the prefrontal cortex.
Let's put ourselves right in the middle of a scenario where those rehearsed scripts are the absolute standard. Say, networking at a massive industry conference, like South by Southwest in Austin, Texas.
Oh, the ultimate scripted environment.
You are standing in a crowded, noisy convention center lobby. You're holding a lukewarm coffee, wearing a lanyard, and you are introduced to someone new. The absolute default, deeply rooted neural pathway for this moment is to ask, so what do you do?
Everyone ask it.
It is a transaction. It immediately places the person in a hierarchical box based on their job title and their perceived income bracket.
And what happens mechanically when you ask that? They will access their rehearsed elevator pitch.
They've said it a million times.
Their eyes will glaze over slightly because they've answered this question 40 times today. Their brain is on autopilot, and absolutely zero meaningful connection is made.
Exactly. Now imagine flipping that script. What if, instead of asking, what do, you look them in the eye and ask a pattern-interrupting question?
I love those.
Something like, what is the most exciting project you're working on right now? Or, what is taking up the most of your headspace these days? The shift in the other person is instantaneous.
You can literally see their posture change.
You have completely altered the neurochemistry of the interaction. You are essentially handing them a concentrated dopamine hit by giving them permission to talk about their passions, their chaos, or their creativity, rather than just reciting their corporate obligations.
That dopamine hit is very real. When you ask someone to dive into what excites them, the reward centers of their brain light up. They become animated.
They come alive.
And structurally, they associate those positive, rewarding feelings directly with you, the person who facilitated the experience. But there's another layer of mechanics at play here regarding vulnerability.
Oh, how so?
Asking a truly open, curious question demands vulnerability from the asker. You are implicitly saying, I don't know the answer, and I am willing to be the student here. In doing so, you grant authority, status, and expertise to the person answering.
You are elevating them.
Yes, human beings have a deep psychological hunger to feel elevated, respected, and seen as experts in their own lived experience. When you make someone feel like an expert, they will walk away from the conversation convinced that you are one of the most brilliant, charismatic conversationalists they have ever met, even if you only spoke for 10 seconds to ask the question.
It is the ultimate conversational hack. You give them the stage, but you construct the stage with your curiosity. Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next. Now, we have to look at the massive amount of data that isn't being spoken at all. The next concept is reading between the lines, which is all about decoding body language, tone, and unspoken emotions like a pro.
The silent language.
We've talked about the words we say and the questions we ask, but the reality is the verbal channel is just a tiny fraction of the communication ecosystem.
It is merely the tip of the iceberg. Classic communication studies, regardless of how you interpret the exact percentages, universally agree that nonverbal cues carry significantly more emotional weight than spoken words.
Posture, expressions, all of it.
Yes. Posture, facial expressions, the cadence of speech, the physical distance between speakers. This is the raw, unfiltered data of human emotion. If I say the words, I am totally fine, while making warm eye contact and keeping my shoulders relaxed, the verbal and nonverbal channels are congruent.
They match.
But if I say, I am totally fine, while staring at the floor, crossing my arms tightly and letting out a sharp sigh, the channels are incongruent.
And what does that tell us?
An amateur communicator listens to the words and takes them at face value. A professional communicator recognizes that when the words and the body contradict each other, the body is almost always telling the truth.
I think the stakes for reading this nonverbal data have never been higher because our environment has fundamentally changed. Let's look at the modern American workplace, which is now heavily reliant on Zoom and remote video meetings.
It's a completely different ballgame.
In a physical office, reading the room is relatively straightforward. Your peripheral vision picks up so much data. You can see if someone is tapping their foot in agitation under the table. You can sense the physical energy shift when the boss walks in.
You feel the room.
But how on earth do you decode a room when the room is just a grid of 12 tiny, grainy boxes on a laptop screen? You have lost 80% of your physical data. You can only see people from the shoulders up, and half the time the lighting is terrible.
It's a huge challenge.
We are forced to analyze hyper-specific micro-expressions or pay attention to the digital equivalents of body language.
The digital equivalent of body language is a fascinating evolution. Because we are starved for physical cues, we have to hyper-focus on the mechanics of the interface. The mute button hesitation is a perfect example.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
If you propose a new strategy and you see someone's hand hover over their mouse, their mute icon flash off, and then immediately flash back on without them saying a word, that is a massive piece of data.
They wanted to speak but stopped themselves.
That is a suppressed objection. That is a sigh they didn't want to broadcast.
Or when someone subtly leans back from their webcam and crosses their arms. Even though you can't see the rest of their body, that physical withdrawal from the lens is a clear indicator of resistance.
Absolutely.
But here's where I want to push back, or at least express a major concern I have with this whole idea of reading people. Aren't we in extreme danger of just projecting our own internal anxieties onto other people?
That is a very real risk.
For example, let's say I am presenting my quarterly numbers on a Zoom call. I am internally terrified that my numbers are weak. My amygdala is fired up. Because my brain is searching for threats, I look at my boss in one of those little boxes. I see her resting face. Maybe she's just staring intently at the screen. And my anxious brain immediately translates that neutral data as, she is furious, she hates this presentation.
When in reality, she's just deeply focused on the spreadsheet.
Exactly. How do we decode body language without becoming paranoid mind readers who invent subtext that doesn't actually exist?
That is the crucial trap of nonverbal decoding. When your own nervous system is dysregulated, your interpretation of others' body language becomes highly unreliable. Your brain will aggressively seek out evidence to confirm your own fears.
So how do we stop doing that?
The mechanical defense against this projection is a technique called baselining. A master communicator doesn't read a single expression in a vacuum. They observe a person's baseline behavior when they are in a neutral, stress-free state.
Okay, establishing a baseline.
Right. If your boss's default, relaxed face, naturally involve a furrowed brow and intense eyes, then seeing that face during your presentation is not a sign of anger. It is just her baseline. You only attach meaning to deviations from the baseline.
So if she normally smiles and nods and suddenly she adopts the furrowed brow, then you have a data point.
Exactly. And even then, you do not treat your interpretation as an absolute fact. You treat it as a hypothesis that must be tested.
How do you test it?
If you suspect resistance based on a crossed arm or a mute button hesitation, you don't panic and derail the presentation. You test the hypothesis by asking an emotionally intelligent, open question. You pause and say, I've just thrown a lot of data out there. Before I move on, I want to check in. How is this strategy landing with everyone?
Ah, so you bring it into the open.
You use the nonverbal cue to prompt a verbal clarification. You invite them to put the unspoken resistance on the table.
That makes it so much more manageable. You aren't playing psychic. You are just using the physical cues as a compass to tell you where to dig with your questions. Like subscribe and share for more update and continue to next.
Exactly right.
This leads us into what is arguably the crucible of the entire framework. We are looking at handling conflict without burning bridges.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
The goal here is to turn arguments into opportunities for stronger connections. This requires a massive mental shift, because most of us view conflict as a zero-sum game. If we are arguing, one of us has to win, which means one of us has to lose. Therefore, conflict is dangerous, to be either avoided at all costs or fought to the bitter end.
And that zero-sum mindset is the death of connection. When you view conflict as a battle for dominance, your amygdala locks you into fight or flight. The framework requires us to reconceptualize conflict entirely. Conflict is not warfare. It is simply misaligned energy that requires coordination. Two people have different needs, different data sets, or different fears, and those realities are bumping into each other. The goal is not to obliterate the other person's perspective. The goal is to align the energies so you can solve the problem together.
Let's explore the mechanics of this in a highly volatile US-based scenario. And to be clear to you listening, we are looking strictly at the architecture of the conversation here, not taking any political sides on the issue itself.
Right, purely the mechanics.
Let's imagine a notoriously tense environment, a town hall meeting in a small Ohio town. The issue on the table is a new zoning law. It might bring in a massive commercial development, which promises jobs, but it could drastically change the quiet residential feel of the neighborhood.
Emotions will be very high.
The room is packed, the fluorescent lights are buzzing, emotions are running incredibly hot because people feel their livelihoods, their property values, and their homes are directly threatened. Or, on a more microscopic scale, imagine the classic stressful family Thanksgiving dinner where relatives with wildly different worldviews are trapped at the same table.
Both are pressure cookers.
In either scenario, the default human posture is me versus you. My side of the table against your side of the table. How do we mechanically shift that dynamic?
The mechanical shift is moving the interaction from me versus you to us versus the problem. This involves a psychological and sometimes physical repositioning.
Walk me through that at the town hall.
Let's say a citizen stands up at the microphone, points at the mayor, and yells, "You were trying to destroy our town just to make a quick profit."
Yeah.
That is a direct me versus you attack.
Right.
The mayor's natural biological instinct will be to defend their character and counterattack the citizen. If they do that, the room descends into chaos.
A total screaming match.
But if the mayor is operating with this upgraded communication identity, they will use emotional intelligence to bypass the attack and reposition the problem. The mayor might say, "I hear the deep fear in your voice about losing the character of the neighborhood we both love. How can we work together to ensure that we get the economic growth we need to keep the schools funded without sacrificing the community feel?"
Look at what just happened there. The mayor didn't accept the role of the enemy. They metaphorically took the problem, the zoning law, and placed it on the table between them. Suddenly, they are standing shoulder to shoulder, looking at a shared puzzle.
Precisely. And the same architecture works at Thanksgiving. If a relative attacks your life choices or your career, you do not counterattack their life choices. You shift the focus to a shared value.
Give me an example.
You say, it sounds like we both value hard work and providing for our families, but we have very different definitions of what that looks like in the modern economy. Tell me more about how you see it. You remove yourself from the line of fire and make the difference in perspective the subject of mutual curiosity.
And there is a fascinating psychological concept mentioned here. The idea that relationships can actually be better after an argument than they were before. That feels counterintuitive.
It does, but it's rooted in developmental psychology, specifically John Bowlby's work on attachment theory, and it's called rupture and repair.
Rupture and repair.
When two people experience a conflict, a rupture, it induces stress. But if both parties successfully navigate that conflict using the tools we've discussed, active listening, emotional granularity, us versus the problem, they achieve a repair.
And the repair makes it stronger.
The relationship emerges stronger than if the conflict had never happened. Why? Because the relationship has been stress tested. You have empirically proven to each other that you can get messy, disagree vehemently, and still maintain respect and find a path forward.
Wow.
A relationship that has never had a conflict is untested and fragile. It relies on everyone suppressing their true needs. A relationship that has survived a healthy rupture and repair is robust and deeply resilient.
It's incredibly hopeful. It means we don't have to fear the argument, we just have to master the repair. Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
I completely agree.
So we've survived the conflict. Now we need to look at how we thrive when we are building entirely new connections. The next concept is building instant rapport.
This is a fun one.
The framework outlines simple, almost invisible techniques that make people feel instantly comfortable and drawn to you. We've all met someone where we just instantly clicked, right? It feels like magic. But the source material breaks it down as highly mechanical.
It feels magical because it happens below the threshold of conscious awareness. We are biologically wired to trust people who are similar to us. It is a primitive survival heuristic.
Because similar meant safe in the caveman days.
Exactly. In our evolutionary past, the familiar was safe, and the unfamiliar was a potential predator or a rival tribe. Building instant rapport is the conscious act of intentionally signaling familiarity to the other person's subconscious.
How do we do that mechanically?
We do this through three primary mechanics: mirroring, pacing, and leading. Mirroring is the subtle, respectful reflection of the other person's communication style. If they speak softly and slowly, you lower your volume and slow your cadence.
You match their energy.
If they use specific industry jargon, you fold those words into your own sentences. If they lean forward, you eventually lean forward. You're creating a sensory environment that reflects their own reality back to them. Their brain registers this similarity and instantly drops its defensive barriers.
Let's visualize how precise this needs to be. Picture a high-end luxury real estate agent working in Miami, Florida. The market is cutthroat, the properties are worth tens of millions of dollars, and the clients are highly demanding, successful people.
Very intense environment.
This agent is meeting a brand new, extremely wealthy client for the very first time at a beachfront penthouse viewing. The agent has maybe 5 minutes to establish absolute, unshakable trust, or that client will just walk out and call another broker. Let's say the client steps off the private elevator with incredibly high, fast-paced, assertive energy. They are talking quickly, making broad gestures, and aggressively asking about square footage.
Okay, high-octane client.
If the agent responds to that intense energy with a slow, laid-back, quiet, beach vibe demeanor, there is going to be an immediate, visceral disconnect.
Absolutely. The client's subconscious will instantly flag the agent as a liability, thinking, this person doesn't get my urgency, they can't handle my speed, they aren't sharp enough to represent me.
Exactly. The lack of mirroring creates dissonance. But if the agent reads the room, immediately matches that high energy, adopts a brisk, purposeful walking pace through the condo, and uses sharp, assertive language, rapport is established within seconds.
The client feels a neurochemical sense of alignment. This person speaks my language.
And once that bridge is built, that is where pacing and leading comes in, right?
Yes. Mirroring establishes the connection. Pacing is maintaining that connection over time. But leading is where influence begins. Let's say the Miami client is actually too anxious. They're rushing through the penthouse so fast that they aren't noticing the incredible details that justify the price tag.
They're missing the selling points.
Because the agent has already established rapport by mirroring their high energy, the agent can now begin to gently lead the interaction. The agent might start to slightly slow their own walking pace. They might deliberately pause by the marble countertop and lower their voice just a fraction to point out the craftsmanship.
And the client follows.
Because the subconscious bridge of trust is so strong, the client's nervous system will naturally calibrate to the agent. The client will slow down, lower their own voice, and look at the marble. You match them exactly where they are so you can safely guide them to where the interaction needs to go.
It is so much like tuning two guitars. If you have two guitars in a room and they are slightly off pitch from one another, playing them at the same time creates this harsh, dissonant sound wave that physically grates on your nerves. You want to leave the room.
It's physically uncomfortable.
But when you tune one guitar to match the exact frequency of the other, the sound is perfect. In fact, the physics of resonance means that if you pluck a string on one tuned guitar, the corresponding string on the other guitar will actually begin to vibrate in sympathy, untouched across the room.
Wow.
Mirroring and pacing are just tuning your communication instrument to match the frequency of the human being in front of you.
The physics of sympathetic resonance is the perfect metaphor. When you are in deep rapport, research shows that your actual physiological states, your heart rates, your breathing patterns, even your brain waves, begin to synchronize. You are physically resonating with each other. And that state of profound synchronization is the absolute prerequisite for the next stage of our journey.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
That prerequisite brings us to Chapter 10.
Right. Influence without manipulation. The goal is to speak in a way that naturally inspires and motivates others to take action. Now, we have to talk about the ethics of this because the line here can seem incredibly thin.
It is a vital conversation to have.
We just talked about hacking someone's neurochemistry with active listening, mirroring their body language, and leading their emotional state. If I knew exactly how to press the buttons on the human operating system, how is that not just mind control? What is the actual difference between influence and manipulation?
It is the most critical ethical distinction in the study of human behavior. When you master these tools, you do acquire a form of behavioral power. The difference lies entirely in intent, transparency, and the preservation of autonomy.
Breaking that down, what is manipulation?
Manipulation is the act of coercing someone to take an action that primarily benefits you, often at their expense. It relies on obscuring the truth, utilizing fear, applying undue pressure, or restricting their perceived choices. You are treating the human being as a tool to achieve your own end.
And influence.
Influence, on the other hand, is the act of aligning your goals with their goals for a mutual benefit. You inspire them to take action, not by tricking them, but by illuminating how the action connects to their own deeply held, authentic values. Crucially, influence preserves their autonomy. They retain the unpunished power to say no.
Let's ground this ethical distinction in a community-based United States example. Imagine a grassroots community organizer in Chicago.
Okay, great example.
They're trying to rally a neighborhood to give up their Saturday morning to clean up a local park that has fallen into disrepair and become unsafe. A manipulative approach would rely on shame, guilt, and fear-mongering. The organizer might stand on a porch and say, if you don't come out and clean this park tomorrow, you are terrible neighbors. Your property values are going to plummet, and it will be your fault when the neighborhood is ruined.
It uses negative emotion to force compliance.
Exactly. It might actually work for one weekend, but it builds deep resentment.
Yes, manipulation burns the bridge behind it.
So what does the influential approach look like? The organizer uses the exact same communication tools. They mirror the crowd's concern. They use emotional intelligence, but they tap into shared values. They gather the neighbors and say, we all chose to live on this street because we want a safe, beautiful place for our kids to grow up. Right now, that park doesn't reflect who we are as a community. Let's get together tomorrow, reclaim that space, and build the neighborhood we all deserve.
It's inspiring.
It connects the physical labor of picking up trash to the core emotional value of community pride and protecting their children.
Notice the structural difference in the language. The manipulative approach weaponizes you statements to isolate and pressure. You are terrible neighbors. The influential approach utilizes we statements to unify and elevate. We all chose to live here. Who we are.
The power of we.
Influence operates on the principle of inclusion. You're not standing behind them, pushing them toward a goal they don't want. You're standing next to them, pointing toward a desirable, shared future that you could build together.
But I want to push on this just a little more, because if I am that Chicago organizer and I am highly trained in this 21-day framework, I know that the we statement is going to trigger a stronger neurochemical response than the you statement. I am actively engineering the phrasing to maximize compliance. Even if the goal is a clean park, which is good for everyone, aren't I still pulling the strings behind the curtain? Where is the objective line?
It is a profound philosophical boundary. The objective line is the presence of uncoerced agency. If you are using psychological techniques to bypass their critical thinking, or if you are withholding vital information that would change their decision, you are manipulating them, regardless of how noble your intentions are.
So it's about their freedom to choose.
Exactly. Influence means you present the most compelling, value-aligned, resonant argument possible, using all the skills at your disposal, but you entirely surrender the outcome. You fully accept that they have the sovereign power to say no.
So if they say no, what happens?
If the Chicago neighbors say, "We understand your vision, we agree with the values, but we simply do not have the time this Saturday," the influential organizer accepts that without retaliation and looks for another collaborative solution. The manipulative organizer resorts to punishment, deeper guilt trips, or social ostracization. The true test of influence is how you behave when the answer is no.
That clarity is so helpful. Influence invites collaboration, manipulation demands compliance. Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
Moving toward the end of the framework, we hit a concept that feels like a necessary recalibration: finding your authentic voice.
Yes, the core idea is stopping the performance and communicating as the most powerful version of yourself. And I think this is vital because after learning about baselining, mirroring, emotional formulas, and neurochemistry, there's a massive risk that we just turn into hyper-calculated communication robots.
That is a very common phase in this journey. When people first become aware of the mechanics of communication, they enter a stage of conscious incompetence and then conscious competence.
Where you're thinking about every single move.
Exactly. In that stage, every interaction feels incredibly heavy. You are actively thinking about your posture, analyzing their eye contact, and filtering your vocabulary. It feels like a high-wire performance,
Yeah.
and it drains your psychological battery rapidly.
It's exhausting.
Furthermore, masking your true personality to execute these techniques perfectly creates an uncanny valley effect. Human beings possess a highly attuned, intuitive radar for authenticity. We can sense when someone is performing a script, even if the script is flawlessly polite.
We feel that something is off.
We feel the lack of genuine presence, and it makes us inherently distrustful. True mastery of this framework is not about layering a fake, optimized persona over your real self. It is about utilizing these tools to strip away your anxieties and defensive habits so that your core, authentic voice can finally emerge without obstruction.
Let's look at an example from the modern media landscape where authenticity is the currency of the realm. Think about a podcaster or a public speaker based in Denver, Colorado. They have brilliant paradigm-shifting ideas, but they are struggling to build an audience. Why? Because the moment they step up to the microphone, they put on their broadcaster armor. They try to sound like a flawless, highly polished network news anchor from 1995.
Too stiff.
Way too stiff. They strip out their natural conversational rhythm, they hide their slight regional accent, they suppress their quirky sense of humor, all in the desperate pursuit of sounding professional. But the audience is bored. It sounds like a corporate training video. The audience craves connection, not perfection.
Absolutely.
The moment that speaker decides to drop the armor, maybe they stumble over a sentence and genuinely laugh at themselves, maybe they let their real, unpolished frustration about a topic bleed into their tone, the audience leans in. The imperfections don't destroy the credibility, they validate the humanity.
Perfection is a shield designed to protect the speaker from criticism. But perfection is relationally repellent. We might admire a flawless performance, but we only connect with vulnerability.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it.
Finding your authentic voice means having the courage to put the shield down. It means trusting that your natural curiosity, your honest emotions, and your unique perspective are enough to hold the room. The communication tools we've discussed, active listening, emotional granularity, don't replace your personality, they act as a clean amplifier for it.
I do have a question about the limits of authenticity, though. What if someone believes their truly authentic voice is just naturally incredibly blunt, aggressive, or overwhelming? I've met people who say, I'm just a brutal truth teller, that's my authentic self, deal with it. In those cases, doesn't telling them to be authentic just give them a free pass for terrible behavior? Does authenticity ever trump adaptability?
That is a brilliant distinction that needs to be made. We have to separate the authentic self from the defended self.
The defended self.
The person who claims, I'm just naturally aggressive, that's my truth, is almost never operating from their authentic core. They're operating from a heavily defended posture. They're using bluntness and aggression as armor to keep people at a safe distance and prevent true intimacy.
So they're just scared.
Yes, true authenticity is grounded, present, and deeply connected to the reality of the moment. It is who you are when you are completely unafraid. If someone says their authentic self is boring, it usually just means they're suppressing their passions out of fear of judgment.
That's so profound.
Adaptability and authenticity are not mutually exclusive. Think of water. Water remains authentically water whether it is poured into a delicate teacup or raging in a river. You can authentically adapt your volume, tone, and pacing to suit a formal boardroom or a casual coffee shop without losing your core identity. Authenticity is never an excuse to bulldoze others. It is the commitment to being fearlessly genuine in your connection with them.
The idea that the aggressive self is actually the defended self completely changes the paradigm. It means bad behavior isn't authenticity, it's just fear in a loud disguise. Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next. We have reached the culmination of our journey. The final concept is your new communication identity. The goal here is the ultimate transformation, carrying these 21 days of deliberate practice into every single area of your life moving forward.
The final reboot.
Right? We've spent this entire time talking about upgrading the operating system. Now we have to talk about what it's like when that system reboots and goes live.
This brings us full circle to the science of neuroplasticity. The 21-day time frame is not an arbitrary marketing gimmick. In behavioral science, it is generally recognized as a baseline period required to begin cementing new neural pathways through daily, consistent practice.
It takes time to build the highway.
By day 21, if you have genuinely engaged with the mechanics of this framework, if you have actively caught your internal monologue spiraling and corrected it, if you have expended the cognitive calories to actively listen, if you have practiced the formula for emotional intelligence, your brain has physically changed.
The hardware is different.
The myelin sheath around those new neural pathways has thickened, making the signals travel faster. This is the magical moment of unconscious competence.
Unconscious competence, where you don't even have to think about it anymore.
You no longer have to consciously think about mirroring someone's body language.
Yeah.
Your body just does it. You no longer have to suppress the urge to counterattack. Your brain naturally seeks the us versus the problem alignment. The tools are no longer a heavy backpack you have to carry around. They have integrated into your nervous system. It is no longer just a set of skills you deploy. It is an identity you inhabit.
I want to paint the picture of what that new identity actually feels like in the real world, in a situation designed to test it. Imagine you are traveling back to your hometown in Pennsylvania for your 10-year high school reunion.
Oh, the ultimate test.
High school reunions are the ultimate stress test for personal growth because the physical environment and the people are incredibly powerful cues that try to drag your basal ganglia right back into your adolescent patterns.
They want the old you.
You walk into that gymnasium smelling the floor wax, surrounded by people who knew the old you, maybe the passive you, the highly defensive you, or the awkward you. But you have completed this metamorphosis. A former bully or a highly critical old acquaintance walks up and tries to bait you into a passive-aggressive argument about your career.
A total trap.
Instead of your amygdala flaring up, instead of freezing or snapping back defensively, your upgraded operating system smoothly engages. You effortlessly use emotional intelligence, you reframe the comment with a warm smile, and you diffuse the tension instantly.
You don't even sweat it.
An old friend starts a superficial, rehearsed dual monologue about their car, and you naturally ask a profound, pattern-interrupting question. Suddenly, you are having a deep, meaningful catch-up. You aren't sweating, you aren't calculating your next move. People look at you, and they can't quite articulate it, but they notice you just feel different.
The energy is shifted.
You possess a gravity, a calm, and a warmth that wasn't there 10 years ago. You haven't just learned how to talk better, you've become an entirely different kind of presence in the room.
That is the ultimate synthesis of the work. Communication is fundamentally the lens through which you interact with all of reality. If your lens is cracked, distorted by anxiety, poor listening, defensiveness, and unresolved internal monologues, the reality you experience will be full of unnecessary conflict, missed opportunities, and profound isolation.
It colors everything.
When you undergo this metamorphosis, you are polishing the lens. You see the people around you more clearly, they see you more clearly, and the reality you navigate becomes richer, more collaborative, and vastly more successful. It impacts the trajectory of your career, the depth of your marriage, the strength of your friendships, and ultimately, your relationship with yourself. It is, without exaggeration, the highest leverage skill a human being can possibly master.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update and continue to next.
Incredible journey.
As we bring this incredible discussion to a close, let's take a moment to look back at the ground we've covered. We started by looking inward, recognizing that the invisible language of our internal narrator dictates our physiological state before we even open our mouths.
It all starts in the mind.
We unpacked the biology of our defensive patterns and learned how to build new neural highways rather than fighting old habits. We discovered the immense trust-building power of the cognitive calories spent on active listening and the vulnerability required to ask world-expanding questions. We learned the exact mechanical formula to release the pressure valve of our emotions safely and how to read the unspoken, nonverbal data of human interaction without projecting our own fears.
From conflict to connection.
We reframed conflict from a zero-sum battle into a shared puzzle, allowing ruptures to become repairs. We explored the physics of mirroring and pacing to build instant rapport and define the crucial ethical boundary between inspiring influence and coercive manipulation. And finally, we learned how to drop the heavy armor of perfectionism to let our authentic voice resonate, stepping fully into a new, unconsciously competent communication identity.
It is a profound roadmap that moves us from the mechanics of isolation to the biology of true connection.
I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over as you step away from this and back into your daily life. We've established today that communication is not a fixed genetic trait you were born with. It is a muscle that can be trained, a biological operating system that can be upgraded. So think about the one conversation you have been actively avoiding all week. Now that you know communication isn't a fixed trait, but a muscle you can train, what is the cost of staying silent? Thank you so much for joining us here at Book Podcast Zone. We encourage you to take the insights from day one and apply them deliberately in your very next interaction. Until next time.